Williams is going to come and preach to us this morning, and we're going to have let's give her a cheer. Very good. Very good. And we're going to have the scripture video before she starts.
Then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with the 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break these seals and open the scroll?" But no one in heaven, nor on earth, or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. I wept and wept, because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside it. Then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals." Then I saw a lamb, looking as if it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. The lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God, sent out into all the earth. He went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne. And when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each had 1 harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's people. And they sang a new song, saying, "You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because you were slain. And with your blood you purchased for God persons from every tribe and language and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on the earth."
I'm Emily. I'm married to Dave, the glamorous lectern assistant. And we've got 4 children, and we've been part of this church for almost 4 years now. One of my hobbies, not that I actually have many hobbies having 4 children, but one of my few hobbies is I love to read. I'm also quite an impatient person, so I've got this sneaky little thing that I do when I get a new book, where I read the last page of the book first. I don't know if anyone else does that. Thank you, Zoe. Obviously, for some books, like a good, juicy novel, this can kind of ruin the ending. But I find that it gives me a lot of hope. You know, when you get stuck in the in-between book bit, especially when it's like a big fat book, and you're like, where is this going? You know where it's going because you've read the end. If we flip ahead the history books for a peek at the end of the planet, would it bring hope? This is hope, that's my face. This is hopefully a map of Southampton, coming up on the screen here, maybe. And it shows, if we get it, the levels of deprivation in relation, in relation to the rest of the country in 2019. The red areas, so where it's dark red, show the areas that in the bottom 10% most deprived in the country. So just have a look on that map. You might spot some of the areas that you live in. Just a look at this map is honestly quite worrying and probably not the place to start a talk on hope for our communities. But these, for a lot of us, are our communities, and they face very real struggles and hardships. We had some friends over the other evening, and the next morning my 7-year-old came into my bedroom very angry that we'd eaten all the food. At first I thought he was joking, then he started to cry and said, "If you eat all the food, there's not going to be any left for me." I assured him, of course we didn't eat all the food, and there would always be enough for him. But then he looked very serious and said, "Really? Because my friend Ellie told me that her mummy doesn't have enough food and she only gets 1 meal a day." I work in a lot of these communities, and I see on a daily basis the very real effects of the cost of living crisis, which isn't just propaganda. It's not some detached, far-off problem. It's in our communities. And it can make us feel hopeless and wonder, how on earth are we going to fix all of this? But to have any sense of hope for our communities, we've got to read ahead. we've got to start at the end with the picture of what it's supposed to be, not in the history books, but in the Bible. Rather than panicking and thinking, how on earth are we going to fix all this? We need to focus on asking God to fulfill what he's promised. Our communities don't need fixing, his promises need fulfilling. I'm going to start at the end of the chapter because there's something in this picture, well actually it's a song at the end of Revelation 5, that is so vital if we want to see not just a theological idea of hope, but a real, life-changing, situation-altering hope released into our communities. And that thing is belonging. So call it point 1 if that helps you to keep on track with where we're going. But really, this first point, belonging, is the point that's going to underpin the next things that I speak about. Everything I speak of later, humility, sacrifice, and diversity, little sneak peek there, are in order that we can enable belonging. So John, he's the author of Revelation, and he was one of Jesus' friends when he was alive. He's been given a vision of the future, of how everything in the Bible and all of God's plans for people is going to end. I'll unpack it a bit later, but I want to focus just on this last bit for now. In verse 10, it says, "You made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on the earth." The angel in this vision of John's says that God has purchased people from all groups, and he's made them to be 2 things. He's made them to be a kingdom, something that's united under one rule and purpose, and he's made them to be priests. And priests under Old Testament law were the only ones who could enter God's presence, and they stood in the gap for others. But now it says, we're all priests. We all have access to God. God's heart, from when he made Adam and Eve to be his friends at the start, all the way thousands of years later when he extended his biggest invitation for people to come back through Jesus and his death and resurrection, his heart was always for one thing: a people for his own possession. And the angel is telling John 2 places that God's people now belong: as priests, belonging in the presence of God, in relationship with him. We're told we're adopted into God's family when we accept Jesus. There is belonging personally for us. And there's belonging in the kingdom, the corporate group. I'm starting at the end because I believe that the most powerful, practical, and visual tool that we have to bring the hope of Jesus to our communities is right there. It's belonging. And belonging is, believe it or not, a vital need of all humans if we're going to thrive. My grandma, she was a fairly fit and healthy lady for her age. She went out loads, she was in loads of clubs, she went on trips, she volunteered. She had a bunch of places where she belonged, where she was seen and she was known. But then one day, she had a fall, and she couldn't go out. And very quickly, what was mild dementia spiraled, and her physical and mental health were never the same again. Not too many years later, she died. And she would frequently rant and rave about how she'd been forgotten, about how no one called or visited. She got isolated, and she lost hope. Belonging gives hope. It sounds too simple. It sounds unintellectual. But look at the gospel, the good news of Jesus. What is it that he offers us? Connection and relationship. Why did he die? So that we could be reconnected to the Father. Our hope is found in belonging to him. Relationship is what God's heart beats for. And we can't see hope brought to our communities without real, authentic, close-up relationship. And I believe so wholeheartedly that the local church, that you and me, and what we embody, not just here on a Sunday, but every day of the week, is the hope of the world. Totally shameless plug here, but I work for an amazing charity called Safe Families. And the whole reason that this charity was set up was for this exact reason, because everyone deserves to belong. We recruit volunteers from local churches and we link them up with people in their communities who are lonely and isolated and lacking in hope. I was talking to one of the families that I work with the other week, who's actually supported by someone in this church. This single mum had escaped an abusive relationship with her child. She started a new life in a new part of the city where she knew no one. She was lonely and isolated and struggling to parent. But somebody came alongside her, and all they did was visit her every couple of weeks and shared their life with her. And now, a year on, and this lady's whole demeanour has changed. She has hope, because she knows that there is someone in her life who cares. When we look at our communities, we aren't just looking at a bunch of problems to fix. We are looking at an opportunity for the plan of God throughout all of history to be fulfilled. That He is bringing a kingdom, a people, to Himself. In Psalm 137, verse 4, the Israelites, whilst exiled in Babylon, cried out, "How can we sing the songs of the Lord whilst in a foreign land?" And a big chunk of Revelation 5 is a song. And although it's a song that's being sung thousands of years into the future, it's one that we need to let our lives sing now if we're going to offer hope and belonging to our communities. The next 3 points, humility, sacrifice, and diversity, are some of the practical ways that we can do that. And they're the opposite of what we are told to sing in the land that we live in, where pride and self-sufficiency and superiority can reign. But they are kingdom lyrics that we need to learn to sing if we're going to take hope from just being a fluffy concept to being a reality. So, point 2, humility. When I was younger, and maybe still now if I dare to admit it, I could be very judgmental, particularly to other people's sin. And God's shown me over the years that the times when my heart is at its most judgmental are the times when I'm judging myself the hardest and falling into self-righteousness, where I'm not living in the grace and the forgiveness that Jesus offered me when I gave my life to Him. Luke 7, verse 47 says, "I tell you, her sins, and they are many, have been forgiven, so she has shown me much love. But a person who is forgiven little shows only little love." We can only offer love and forgive and show grace and offer belonging to the extent that we know it ourselves. So John sees a scroll. This represents God's will, His final settlement of affairs of the universe. And it says it's sealed with 7 seals. 7 is a meaningful number in the Bible, meaning whole or complete. So God's complete and perfect will for all of mankind, His final testament, is sealed perfectly, but no one's worthy to open it. To take hope to our communities, we need to know that we are all on a level playing field, because none of us are worthy. Even the best Christians amongst us did nothing to get that title. And until we have really allowed that truth into our hearts, there's going to forever be a stumbling block to reaching our communities, because that is the good news. Ephesians 2, verse 8, "For it is by grace that you have been saved, through faith, not from yourself. It is a gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." If you've been around church circles for a while, you might have heard the phrase belong, believe, behave as a way of describing the journey of someone who doesn't yet know Jesus. But so often we can flip that and we can expect people to behave in certain ways and follow Jesus' commands before they believe and before we will allow them to belong. Our judgment is a hindrance to belonging. I wasn't worthy. No one was worthy before Jesus. To bring hope to our communities, we need to recognize that without Christ, we are nothing. We need to remember what it felt like to be without hope, to feel utterly unworthy, so that we can use that as a powerful tool to connect with others. If you're new here or you're still figuring out what you think of God and church, here at King's Community Church, our values are family, faith, and freedom. And we want that to be the order. We want you to belong in our family first and foremost, and know that we're here to help you figure out the faith and find freedom because we have all been there. None of us are worthy, so let's be humble about it. Point 3, sacrifice. Verse 6 says, "Then I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. The lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out to all the earths." Gotta love when you get revelation as your preaching passage. So in verse 5, he's called a lion. But here, in verse 6, he appears as a lamb slain. He's a lion to conquer Satan, and a lamb to satisfy the justice of God. He's living. It says he stood as a lamb, but he still has the marks of previous sacrifice on him. It says, as though he had been slain. Jesus' life was not a series of upward steps, but of emptying, culminating in his biggest loss. In order to bring hope to our communities, it is going to cost. There should be marks of sacrifice on us. Last year was a pretty hard year for us as a family. We felt God stir us to move from where we were living in Southampton to another part of Southampton called Weston to be part of the team at the Hope Centre, which is a building that King's Community owns in the heart of the Weston estate. Although now, honestly, I would change nothing about it. I love where we live. At the time, it felt really costly, leaving behind a nice neighbourhood, friends, schools, and jobs. There were times when it really did feel like a big sacrifice. I think of Hannah, a single lady in our church who's in her late 30s, living out in another country, reaching unreached people groups. I think of what it costs her to love the community there, the huge distance between her and her family, the potential that she'll never marry or have children, the potential for loneliness living in a country where English isn't the first language. I think of my good friend, Mr. Gibbs, who is a lollipop lady in Weston, who every morning of the year, rain or shine, is stood on Newton Road helping the whole community get across the road safely. A little round of applause for John. You can stand up if you like, John. No. There are times when he calls us to big sacrifices, tangible things. There's other times where the cost is less obvious, like standing out in the rain. What are the marks that you bear in seeking to bring hope to your community? What's it costing you with your finance, your time, your resource, your heart? Jesus is called a lamb. This represents humility, gentleness, and sacrificial love. And that is what we are told to model to our communities. I thought I'd sacrificed a lot to go to Weston. How very noble of me. But then I spent more time around the rest of the team there, and I see daily the many things that are being sacrificed by many people over many, many years. And what I thought was my big dramatic sacrifice looks fairly easy in comparison. A lot of people ask me, what do we do at the Hope Centre? And there's a bunch of stuff that goes on through the week. The programme is fairly full. But it's not what we do that I want to tell people about. It's who we are, which is much harder to explain. I was speaking to someone the other day who was telling me about her friend Philippa, who is one of the absolute heroes in our Hope Centre team. She said, I can't describe the way she makes me feel, but when I'm around her, I just feel light. Another lady started coming to our Tuesday group, and after a couple of weeks was giving testimony of how she felt like she'd found family there. Our communities don't find the hope of Jesus in our programs. They find it in our people. Through their sacrifice of time, energy, and resource, having open hearts and open homes, and inviting others to belong. Love a bit of response. Keep it coming. What I don't want from this is to guilt trip everyone into doing more and signing up to programs. What I want is for us to catch a vision of Jesus, the Lamb that bleeds and lays down everything to stand in the gap for those without hope. In the vision, the Lamb looked as if it had been slain. But Jesus hasn't just died. This vision that John's got is thousands of years into the future. The idea is that the sacrifice of Jesus is still fresh and current before God. My constant challenge is not to become complacent, or stale in sacrifice. To not rest on the sacrifice that I once made, but to continually offer up my whole life as a tool to be used by God, no matter what the cost. Verse 6, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out to all the earth. Even though his sacrifice was evident, the Lamb was not there to be pitied. Throughout the Bible, eyes suggest knowledge and wisdom, and horns suggest power. So this Lamb, Jesus, has knowledge and wisdom and power fulfilled perfectly, shown by the number 7. He knew exactly what he was doing. There was no naivety in it. Obviously, there is wisdom to be had when we're loving others. Jesus models wisdom. But I fear that we're not in danger of being too unwise, but too scared of having our boundaries crossed that we never even get close to the line. There are people who will take advantage of generosity, who will exploit systems and unwisely use resources. Sadly, I see it too often. And this can put us off helping or only offering help when it can be controlled, so it doesn't get squandered. I feel the judgment creeping in. Are they deserving? But then I'm reminded of my unworthiness and how much I abuse what God's given me. Who am I when I daily squander the grace of God to turn around and withhold from others what I have in case they don't do what I want with it? Jesus died whilst we were still sinners, with no guarantee that we would return his affections. Our posture towards our communities cannot be to keep people at arm's length for fear of the impact it will have on our lives. Love and belonging require proximity, getting close, to pull them in no matter what the cost, even if it wrecks our lives, because that's what Jesus has modeled. A lamb, slain, bleeding, laying down for others, standing in the gap, desperate that no one would be without hope. If you don't yet know Jesus today, but you're thinking about it, I don't want you to give your life to Jesus naively. We can't get away from the cost. Maybe it will cost you your reputation or your reputation in your family. But there is nothing more life-giving than when we get to the end of ourselves and offer our whole life for him. He never leaves us empty. Following Jesus costs from the moment that we say yes to him for the rest of our lives. What's it costing you? And fourth and finally, diversity. Verse 9 says, "With your blood you purchased for God persons from every tribe and language and people and nation." There are things of the not yet that it is outright sinful to not pray and work for in the now, and diversity is one of those things that we cannot wait for. Not because it's an on-trend topic or because we want to be seen as inclusive and tolerant, but because love and peace and all the other kingdom traits are not possible without diversity. Diversity can't be a tick box thing. It needs to be a heart posture that is truly not just accepting, but valuing of difference. This is one area that rather than trying to fix, we need to get on our knees and in many ways get out of the way for God to fulfill. When someone gets saved in Weston, where the majority of the population are from a working class background, what's the aim? Is it to gentrify them, get them drinking posher coffee and move into the nicer areas? No, of course it isn't. We are not about seeing people change classes or cultures. We are about seeing them change kingdoms, from dark to light, by grace and through faith, not by works or looks or intellect. There are things that are culturally Christian but not biblical. And we need to be so careful that we don't project a white middle-class version of Jesus onto our diverse communities. And I, as a white semi-middle-class person, need you, my brothers and sisters from other nations and backgrounds, to graciously tell me when I'm doing that. What barriers are we creating that Jesus died to break? The thing that we work towards and pray for and need to be willing to get out of the way for is the unity of the body, with each limb thriving and playing the part it was made to play, not because of its colour or race or the diversity factor that it brings, but because of the beauty that's released when everyone is doing what they were made to do. Diversity is so vital so that everyone, no matter their age or colour or class, male or female, background or culture, feel that they belong. To conclude, we can't fix our communities, but we can be active participants in fulfilling God's promises and plans. And maybe today you do feel stirred. Like I said, this is not about programs, this is about people. But if you feel stirred to connect with more people who need hope and belonging in your communities, then honestly, and they're not even paying me to say this, Safe Families is an incredible way, easy way to do that. And someone's going to be in the reception area later with more information. Likewise, Annalie, who runs our CAP Debt Centre here, is always looking for more people to befriend the clients that she's helping get debt-free. If you're not already, find something in your community that can help you connect with it and bring hope to it. Because it's through us in our communities that hope is brought. Revelation 5 shows us that from the beginning to the cross to new creation, the song has always been the same. It's Jesus. He is the hope for our communities, and he is building his church to be a place of belonging, a house of prayer for all the nations. And we see this promise fulfilled every time we go out of our way and we get out of the way in order to enable others to belong. I don't want you going away just thinking, that was a nice talk, or even that was a mildly offensive talk. I want us to be challenged to honestly assess our hearts. Where do we need more humility? Is there judgment towards certain types of people or groups? Are we building barriers that Jesus has died to break? Where have we drawn the lines of the sacrifice that we're willing to offer? Too scared of getting hurt or taken advantage of that we don't reach out? Are we too tired, too disillusioned by the lack of diversity and positive change? Isaiah verse 31 says, "Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength." Get with Jesus and get your hope renewed that change is possible and is happening. Are you lacking a sense of belonging today? Don't feel like you belong, can't find your place? Today is a day to reach out. Don't stay disconnected. Are you feeling unworthy today? Full of guilt and shame at a distance from God and others. Jesus died so that you would never have to feel cut off again. If you don't yet know him and what it feels like to belong to him, but you want to, then I want to invite you to come forward in a minute, because someone would love to welcome you into the family. I'll move this forward a little bit. So I'm totally stealing Wayne's party trick, which may not go so well because I'm wearing a microphone. But as the band just come now and we go back into worship, I'm just going to put my visual aid on. Oh no, I've totally fluffed up the microphone. This is a jumper that I brought a couple years back as a prophetic statement after being in a season of feeling tired and on the fence and a bit stubborn and standoffish with God and church. My pride and my plans were getting in the way of what God wanted to use me for. And one day, out of nowhere, God challenged me. Are you in or not? And I just knew. The response was, I'm in. I didn't know what it looked like, what I was specifically responding to, but I knew that was the response. God, I'm in. Whatever you want, whatever you've got for me, your way is better than mine. Your plan for my life is better than any I could come up with. I'm in. I'd like to invite you to stand now. And I want to invite us to respond. And I want to do it a little bit differently today. And I want to invite us to come forward as a response. And this is a thing between you and God, but it's also a corporate thing where we get to respond together as a body. If you know today that that's your response, I'm in, for the first time or for a fresh time. The sacrifice of Jesus never gets old, and his invitation to us is the same as the day that he first called us to be his. Lay down your pride, your preferences, your self-protection. Let me lead and guide and provide as you partner with me to bring hope to a broken world. So are you in this morning? As the band play now, the prayer team's going to come out to the sides and to the front. But if you know that that's your response this morning, I'm in, then I want to invite you to come forward now and get right before God.